keynote speaker, Professor Jeremiah Chakaya. He has had and does have many roles, but I think perhaps if we introduce you today as the lead of the Respiratory Society of Kenya, and he's flown in specially for this event. So thank you, Chakaya, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Kerry, and thank you again to the organizers for the opportunity to speak at this important event. I feel really honored to have been requested to do this. And as you all know, or some of you know, I'm a little passionate about this disease called TB. And I was given a topic that I think is relevant today. We committed ourselves as the global TB community to end TB by 2030, which is 6 years from now. And the question is, what will it take to be able to do that? For us to be able to think about ending TB by 2030, it may be useful to think about the problem that needs to be solved. Now, the problem of tuberculosis has been with us for a very long time, and I'm told it was the first disease that was the first infectious disease that was declared a global emergency by the World Health Organization in 1993. And at that time, the WHO elaborated a strategy that was called the dose strategy. And the dose strategy ran with us until 2005 or thereabout. And then we had the Millennium Development Goals and what have you, and 1995 or something like that. And then we had the Stop TB strategy, which ran until we went into the era of the Sustainable Development Goals. And with the Sustainable Development Goals, we came up with a really ambitious global strategy to ending TB. So for the first time, we said we don't want to, in the DOS strategy, it was about finding 70% of people with TB and treating 85% of those people with TB. In the Stop TB strategy, it was still about finding people with TB. And the transformation came in 2016 onwards as part of the Sustainable Development Goals to say we want to end this problem of TB once and for all. If we want to end, those were the targets that were set for us. We wanted to drop the incidence compared with 2015 by 80% in 2030 and mortality by 90%. And those were really, really ambitious targets. And the question is, where are we with those targets? Unfortunately, we are not doing very well. By last year, 2023, 10.8 million people were estimated to have developed TB globally, and about 1.25 million people had died from this disease. But you might say, so what? I mean, we're making progress anyway. But if you look at where we were in 2015 and where we are now, we are not doing very well as a global TB community. The numbers of people developing TB have remained largely the same, and the numbers of people that are dying from TB are more or less the same. Yes, last year, 2023, we had some really good news from the Global TB Program. For the first time, notifications of TB were the highest ever that we have achieved as Global TB community. However, we are still very far from ending TB the way we wanted to do in the coming 6 years. And therefore, it makes a lot of sense to think about why we are not making as much progress as we thought we would make. And I think for me, the key things that are preventing us from getting to that ambitious goal of ending TB in the coming 6 years may be the issue of risk factors for TB. And we just ran through a few of those risk factors for TB. And I think globally, the big driver of TB is undernutrition. Undernutrition is driving tuberculosis incidence across the world. And unfortunately for us, if you look at the global hunger index, we don't seem to be making as much progress as we are. And in fact, this is taken from the Global Health Index, Hunger Index of 2023. If you look at the most recent report that was published just about a month now, the hunger index is increasing. So there are many more people suffering hunger today than there were in 2015, which is very, very worrying indeed. Because as long as we have more problems with people with nutritional problems, then we will continue to have TB. Tuberculosis is driven by social determinants, poverty, social deprivation, and so on. And unfortunately, in those parts of the world where TB is endemic, the slum populations and people who are poor is increasing rather than going the other way around. So this is a real major problem that at this moment in time, we have increasing numbers of people who are becoming poorer, and if people are becoming poorer, there will be TB among those populations. Then there is another worrying thing, which is climate change. And climate change is a real big thing for the TB world that has just come to the fore in the last few years. I think for me, for the very first time, going into a TB meeting and listening to talks on climate change, I realized that we are getting into a rather difficult terrain going forward with the TB problem. What is climate change doing to us? There are many things that are happening, but the big ones are natural disasters like floods, heat waves, and flooding, and droughts. And these are big issues. If you have a drought situation or a flooding situation, you end up with nutritional problems. So the number of people who become malnourished increases. Then if you have more people getting malnourished, you get more TB. You get displacement of people because of especially flooding, and then you end up with food insecurity, and some people have called that the seed and the soil kind of thing. You have a lot more people having tuberculosis being transmitted to them, and you also have at the same time a vulnerable population that's malnourished, where TB can progress rapidly from infection to disease, and you end up with a vicious cycle. And that's the situation we might be going into if something is not done about climate change. And this is really a worrying thing because not everyone believes that climate change is a big issue. And in fact, some of those people are getting into leadership, and we do not know what's going to happen in the coming years. Big worry for us. We have made global commitments, but maybe those global commitments may be focused too much on the biomedical approaches. What are some of those global commitments that we have made? We have had 2 UN high-level meetings on tuberculosis. The first one was in 2018, and the second one happened last year, where great commitments have been made by our political leaders. But the problem is, are those commitments followed through? Then we had a commitment on universal health coverage. Again, great commitments that have been made by political leaders, but the question is, are those commitments going to be followed through? So the World Health Organization is pushing for several things to happen to push the outcomes of the meeting that happened recently, the UN high-level meeting that happened last year. But if you look very carefully at all those issues, they are all biomedical approaches. It's how many people we should cover with TB preventive therapy, how many people we should identify with TB, how many vaccines should come into force, and so on and so forth. And therefore, I think it makes a lot of sense to be thinking, could the answer with the TB problem, in fact, be outside the health sector? if the health sector is going to focus on finding people and treating people and vaccinating people and what have you. But the big driver of TB is social determinants. Could the answer be actually be there rather than in the biomedical area? And if you look at your sustainable development goals, goal 1, very relevant for TB. Goal 2, very relevant for TB. Goal 3, extremely relevant for TB. Goal 4, very, very relevant for TB. And goal 13 now with climate change, extremely relevant for TB. Unfortunately, almost all these are not going in the direction that we were hoping they would go. At this moment in time, if you look at the UN report on where we are with the SDGs, none of these 17 goals are following the trajectory that we were hoping they would follow. Probably the most important thing that could happen, if it was to happen, is to overcome poverty. Poverty, malnutrition, poor access, all the things that people have talked about, it's all about poverty at the end of the day. And if we were to overcome poverty, maybe we would make a real big impact on this problem of TB. And there is some evidence that this, in fact, did happen in places like England and Wales long before anti-TB medicines became available. The rates of TB were coming down in this country like they were in many other parts of the so-called high-income settings or developed countries. Yes, there was a bit of a push with which I'm going to talk about in a short while, but probably one of the bigger drivers there was improvement in people's living conditions, universal access to services, to health services, social protection schemes. So basically, countries like the UK and others were working very hard to get people out of poverty. You move people out of poverty and TB will go to the back door. Is this happening right now? Probably not. Do we have other evidence that there are other things that could help in addressing the problem of TB? And I think, for me, one of the big issues that needs to be considered is the promise of mass screening of people for TB. Unfortunately, at this moment in time, the focus on screening people for TB is to select those that are vulnerable to TB. But in a population like the one that I serve in my country, you really don't know who is vulnerable and who is not vulnerable. It's like all of us are vulnerable, and ideally all of us should be screened for TB. But we tend to select the most vulnerable, and those are the ones that we focus on. Now, will that have the epidemiological impact that we want? We don't know. But look at what has happened in the past. Look at what happened in Alaska. In Alaska, what did they do? They had community-wide, and that's the key thing, is community-wide screening for TB. You don't select people. You don't decide you are vulnerable and you are not vulnerable. As long as you live in that population, you get screened for TB. If you don't have TB, you are given preventive treatment. And if you have TB, you are treated for your TB. And when that happened, there was an annual decline in the incidence of TB in that part of the world by 10% or so. More recently, we have seen work that's been done in Vietnam, and I think I saw Liz Colbert here, the Detect TB work that was done in the slums of Harare. Community mass screening has a major impact on the burden of TB. And this paper was brought to my attention just a few days by Kerry. I need to acknowledge that, yes, I didn't know that this has been done. But it's a wonderful piece of work here, looking at what happened in Glasgow, where a massive effort was done to screen a huge population in the city of Glasgow. And when that was done, there was a significant, first of all, you increased your case notification rate as expected, of course, but that has got an impact of removing all your prevalent cases of TB, terminating transmission of TB, and in the following years that come in, you see rates of TB coming down. So the question is, can we do some of these things to be able to end TB? So this is what I want to say in conclusion. Yes, I think it may be possible to end TB. I don't believe we'll be able to do that in the next 6 years, but maybe we can do it in the next 10 years by 2035. Our NTB strategy goes up to 2035. I think we knew we were not going to make it by 2030, so we increased it a little bit to 2035. That gives us about 10 years, and so it's possible that we could. But if we are going to do that, we must address the social determinants of TB. We cannot continue working in the health sector all by ourselves and thinking that we will be able to address this problem of TB. Alleviating poverty is a real key thing. And this is something that really goes beyond the health sector. The WHO has something they call the multi-sectoral accountability framework. Tuberculosis should ideally be the concern of everyone, and especially political leaders, people who are dealing with food and nutrition, people who are dealing with housing, because if all those things were to happen, then we would start denting the problem of TB. Like it happened in these parts of the world, we need to ensure universal access to health services, including TB services. So at the primary healthcare setting, today, if you go to any country, and I've been lucky to go to many countries in the world, the primary healthcare services do not participate in the TB's screening and testing processes. So we don't have those testing capabilities at the lowest level of the healthcare system where things need to happen. So we need to start introducing and making sure that there are TB services at the lowest level of the healthcare system. We need to use existing tools effectively. Yes, we are all looking forward to the day that we will have a vaccine. And I was talking to Betty yesterday about vaccines and the negativism that's coming out of the population and people not believing in science anymore. Today, if you are to introduce a vaccine in my country and tell everybody to line up to be vaccinated against TB, I can bet that nearly maybe 30, 40, 60% of people will not come through, because to them it'll be, this is a depopulation agenda. That's the one that's getting traction rather than the science behind whatever it is that you're trying to do. So I think we need to use what we have very effectively, screen as many people as we can for TB, provide TB preventive treatment for those that do not have active tuberculosis. We need to address inequities, including gender-related inequalities, and we need to continue, of course, developing new tools because the problem of TB will probably be with us for a long time and requires re-engineering, as it were. And we must be at the forefront of talking to people who know about climate change and putting our feet in there and our noses in there to do something about climate change. Because if we don't do something about climate change, problems like all those diseases of poverty, including TB, will become a big problem going forward. I want to thank you sincerely for listening to me. Thank you.